Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know it's just the top of the hour, so we'll give it another second for a few people to chime on in or join us before we get started. Really excited for today's session. Good content, good information, getting you prepared for those deadlines, lots of incredible panelists sharing good insights. So we'll just go ahead and jump in. Thank you, everybody, again, for joining us for today's MBA prep session with us here at Forté. Today's topic is going to be round one readiness check. What do you need before you apply? We know, and you probably feel this as well, those deadlines will be here sooner than we anticipate. They are creeping up on us. But as I mentioned, some of you might be new to Forté, some of you might be community members returning back. Either way, welcome. We are so thankful to have you here. For those who are new to Forté and the work that we are doing, just quickly want to give an overview of who we are and the work that we're doing here at Forté. Forté was founded in 2002 after a study that showed, there was not the same gender parity between business schools and other professional programs like law school or medical school. And so they were able to kind of dig deep into that. The study is the Women and the MBA Gateway to Opportunity. Since then, incredible work has been made, but that has led to the creation of Forté and us being able to empower women for over 20 years. So we are working with powerful donors, influential speakers, incredible companies that have a shared mission or focus on women and diversity and inclusion, as well as top tier business schools at the graduate level, as well as undergraduate level. So with that incredible network and donors that make events and sponsorship things like this possible, we are really excited to, again, be able to say that we've helped over 135,000 women by supporting them and earning their MBA, whether that be financially or giving them access to resources and connections. We certainly are making progress, but it's still very much an ongoing mission of what Forté is doing to fuel the future of business and get more women leading in business there. I do want to make a plug for some other upcoming events that you can join to explore our community, get to know these schools, and really gain access to the partners that can help make the MBA a reality for you. Perhaps you already know we are having our upcoming forum events taking place in person, various cities around the country in the last 3 weeks of August. You can scan that QR code to see the full schedule and the full agenda. We will also have several virtual events taking place September and October, so stay tuned for those. If you are looking for application prep, you know you're aiming for maybe round one deadlines, you just want a little bit of polish, you want a little bit of assistance or guidance from industry experts and the resources and program partners that we use. On Demand is an asynchronized application prep program designed specifically for folks who are looking to submit within the next couple of months. So this is, again, self-paced, go at your own pace, but if you have a test score, you're pretty ready, you just want some tips and tricks to polish up those other things, your other components, your letters, preparing them, this is the place for you or the program that is best suited for you. If you maybe are a little bit more on the MBA curious side and you're not so sure these round one deadlines are right for you, but you definitely think this year is the way, maybe you're not quite ready to do it all asynchronously by yourself with the content and you would like a little bit of hands-on guidance, but not a full 8-month-long program because you don't have that long of a runway. MBA Launch Accelerator is going to be the program for you. This is a combination of that on-demand asynchronous content as well as several coaching sessions, live Ask Me Anythings and town halls, and a little bit more of that community aspect. Again, for anyone who is looking for a little extra application support to apply this upcoming cycle. I want to give a special thank you to our MBA school sponsors today. You will hear from our amazing friends and supporters that make events like this possible, have incredible knowledge, and are going to do everything they can to share their tips and tricks to make sure you are ready to go for round one. So here again is just kind of the list of where we are and who is here to speak with you today. With that, again, I want to thank you attendees for being here. If you have questions, you can use the Q&A feature. Drop those questions there. Our moderator, Jen, will take a look at those throughout the session, and we should have time at the end for additional questions. But Jen, I'm going to go ahead and just turn it on over to you to get us started on our checklist readiness. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah, for putting all of this together today. And welcome, everyone. My name is Jen Howder. I am the Director of Admissions at the Johns Hopkins University Carey Business School, which is primarily located in Baltimore, Maryland. We also have a campus location in Washington, D.C. But we're really glad that you are here taking the opportunity to learn more about the application process, particularly as you are likely preparing to apply in round one. And I will just start by saying that this is a pretty unique time of year for us in admissions. We are our hands are in a couple different buckets right now. We are putting the finishing touches on welcoming our incoming class, but then we are also making that transition to kicking off another admission cycle. It's also kind of a bittersweet time of year because this is also when we realize that summer is officially starting to come to an end. But today's session is designed to help you feel confident and prepared if you are looking to apply in round one. So we have several prepared questions that we will work through with our panelists today, talking about the advantages of applying early, what to expect within that timeline, some different practical tips for putting together a strong application, and then what happens after you hit submit. But I encourage you, as Sarah mentioned, you can submit questions at any point through the Q&A feature. There's also the chat, and I'll be keeping an eye on that because we will leave a portion of time at the end for those questions, so feel free to submit them at any point. With that, we're going to go ahead and get started by having our panelists introduce themselves. So I'm going to kick things over first to Suzette.
Hi, everyone. Super glad to have you here. My name is Suzette, Assistant Director of Admissions here working on Duke Fuqua's Daytime MBA recruitment team.
Thanks, Suzette. Lindsay?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Lindsay D'Angelo, and I am an Associate Director here at University of Michigan Ross. Excited to have you all here with us today, and I'll pass it back to you, Jen.
Thanks, Lindsay. Elizabeth?
Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Langer. I'm from the MBA admissions and recruitment team at the Cambridge Judge Business School here in beautiful Cambridge in the United Kingdom. So thank you so much for having us here today.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And last but certainly not least, we have Amanda.
Yeah, thanks. My name is Amanda Weiner. I'm the Assistant Dean for the Georgetown McDonough MBA admissions team. I'm representing our full-time, part-time, and part-time online. And I also graduated myself earlier this year. So I completed the part-time online program.
Congratulations on that. So let's dive into our questions. And I think one of the most common questions we hear from applicants is in terms of, is there an advantage to applying in round one? Or some schools I also know have an early action. So any of those first rounds, is there an advantage? And at the same time, is there any misconceptions out there that we want to put to rest in terms of why it might be better to apply early? And we'll start with Elizabeth on this question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this is going to be different person to person. I think that you really have to think about what schools are you applying to, when are there rounds, because each of the different schools are going to have different rounds. But there is definitely some benefits that round one does have that are a bit unique. Of course, it gives you the most time in your run up to the program starting. So I do think that there are sort of two types of people who are really enjoy round one. You have the people who are really, really prepared and want all that time to make sure that their ducks are in a row. So if maybe you know that you're going to be asking plenty of questions, you want to have lots of time to get everything right, to make sure you're not missing any steps, you're not having to rush through. Round one could be a good fit for you. But then also maybe the people who know that they need a little bit of extra time, maybe because, they know that things might not be the smoothest, or they want to give themselves plenty of time because maybe they don't always do things in the most organized way. So a few different reasons why you might apply in round one, but there are also some logistical benefits. If you need a visa, this gives you more time to make sure that you're not rushing through that process, or maybe having to pay for a priority visa service. In terms of when the program starts, if you know that maybe you're somebody who wants to arrive a bit early, it gives you that buffer. For some schools, there might be more funding available, particularly if certain scholarships or funding opportunities are awarded earlier. So making sure that if you're really excited about something, you're not missing out. And then each school might have something that's a bit more specific that means that you might want to apply in round 1 or maybe in round 1 or 2. So at Cambridge, we have our college system, for example, and there are 31 different colleges, but some of them do have quotas. And these are great. They can provide housing. They provide, an academic community that's interdisciplinary. But if there's somewhere that you really want to be, and you say, this would absolutely make or break my MBA experience, think about applying a bit earlier so that you're not missing out on something that you are excited about. That being said, we have multiple rounds for a reason. It's not only round 1. So I think there are some misconceptions like that you'll only get in if you apply in round 1, or that it's going to be so much harder if you apply later. We have multiple rounds, as I said, for a reason. You have absolutely, if you have a strong profile, for our school at least, you have as much chance of getting in round 5 as you do in round 1. And then, as I said earlier, some people think that you have to be the most organized person on the planet to apply in round 1, which absolutely isn't the case. If you feel your application is ready, why wait? But I'm sure we'll get into a bit more of the tips around that and choosing application rounds more in the Q&A section.
Great, thanks, Elizabeth. Lindsay, did you have anything to add in terms of advantages or misconceptions?
Yeah, so Elizabeth really hit on pretty much everything that I was going to share as well. I'll just, emphasize a few more things. So obviously, yes, the advantages. Round 1 gives you the full pool of seats and, all of the funding that's available for scholarships. So that gives candidates, complete access to capacity and funds for the incoming class. And then just to add on, kind of that preparation piece that Elizabeth talked about. She mentioned visas. I think like organizing housing, planning finances, and like any of that pre-MBA networking definitely gives you more lead time there, right? To get involved in those kind of activities. And then I think, Elizabeth did a great job as well hitting on the myths. It's easier to get into round 1. That's not always the case, right? Again, capacity is 100%. The round 1 applicant pool is our first pool that we look at in a wave of a cycle. But, it's usually an exceptionally competitive pool. So that is something also that, we consider. And so I will say people who are looking, more towards consulting, investment banking, those type of things, those are usually who we do see, applying in round 1 because their recruiting starts very, very quickly once they get into school. So, just, thinking about all those things, but it's definitely not easier, I would say. And then again, you have it in your head, you must apply in round 1 no matter what. Again, we do have other rounds for reasons. All of us offer scholarships and opportunities in each round. So I would wait till your application is the strongest to submit. I think that's the best advice we could give across the board here.
Thanks, Lindsay. And we will get into that question in just a moment in terms of why you might wait until a future round. But I want, Suzette, if you can touch a little bit on the timeline. So if you apply in the first round, what will that look like once you hit submit? What typically comes next in that timeline?
Sure. So this is also going to depend on your target schools. So of course, please reference their websites for exact dates, but I can speak to Fuqua's process. So our round 1 applications are due late September. They are due September 30th. And after your application is submitted, that is when we make our interview decisions. So you will receive an interview decision by November 11th. That means you will find out whether you were invited to interview or not invited to interview. Please keep in mind how early you receive that decision has nothing to do with the strength of your application. So if it's getting to be early November, you haven't received the interview invitation, you're getting a little nervous, Don't worry, it is completely random. It just is up to when we get to reviewing your specific application, which is randomized. You'll then receive your final decision on December 10th. And if you're admitted, round one is not a binding round at Fuqua, so you will just need to make your final decision and submit your deposit by February 16th.
Awesome. Amanda, do you have some insights from your end at Georgetown?
Yeah, our timeline is very similar. We don't have a deadline on when you'd hear back from the interview piece. I really like that idea actually, but I think the overall advice here is to map out the deadlines on your end. So look at the schools that you're applying to. I would like add your own calendar, map them out so you know what's coming ahead of you. You can keep track of those notification dates, the deposit deadlines, all of that. So I think a great tip would be, I think people lose track of them, which makes sense. Life is busy, you're applying to a lot of schools, but add them to the calendar, make sure you note those down so you know what's coming your way.
I think that's a great piece of advice. I know often when we're sending out interview invitations, sometimes they can get lost in, the overwhelming inboxes these days. So if you have those dates on the calendar, you can be more mindful of looking for them, because we would hate anyone to miss the interview opportunity just because it's wound up in spam or junk mail. So that's a wonderful tip to keep a calendar of those dates. Lindsay, can you tell me about some scenarios of why people might want to wait to submit in a later round instead of getting it right out of the gate in round one?
Yeah, sure. So I think some of the top things that probably come to mind in this and why candidates, we have the extra rounds and why they submit in round 2 or round 3 or subsequent rounds. Some schools have those. I think probably the first thing is, boosting those standardized test scores. So most MBA programs take, the GMAT, GRE scores, maybe another test. We here at Ross take the executive assessment, and then we have another subsequent, if you decide not to take a test, it would be a statement of quantitative academic readiness for us, and other schools have different requirements for that. But say you either submit a statement of quantitative academic readiness and then you decide to take a test, and then you want to improve your GMAT or your GRE score goes up by 20 or 30 points, then maybe that's something, you wait to apply in round 2 till you have those test scores. So, you have the backup plan of, maybe, I'll submit this, statement instead. But I think it's important to consider, if you do want to take those tests during that time frame and you think that that's really going to help your application, that maybe you wait till a later round when your application would be stronger and you can show the quantitative side a little more. I think another one that comes to mind is pending promotion or like a major project milestone that you are working on through your job. And so if you're like just up again for like a formal title change, a promotion, maybe a high impact project rollout is scheduled for you, more in that fall timeframe, then maybe waiting to round 2, allows you, to present us, a stronger resume, more executive level leadership. All of those things really do give impact to your application, because I know all of us business schools look very holistically at you as a candidate. So all those things definitely matter. And then maybe you also have like a recent job change or career shift. And so maybe, you want to get some experience and some time in the new role before you, speak on it, give your resume, show some impacts that you've done in that role. That may take a little bit of time. So you may want to, take a step back, focus on your role in the present time, and then, work little by little on your MBA application so that you can, demonstrate early wins that happen in that role, articulate like clear, narrative around why you decided to make this move at this time and why that plays into your journey and your readiness for an MBA.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay. I think all of those different scenarios really highlight this idea of the self-awareness that it takes a candidate to determine the best point if they are anticipating any of those changes of a job, promotion, um, retaking a test. That is something that we really look for within the application, is kind of those subtle details show us a lot about a candidate in terms of how self-aware they are. And one thing I would even add is something like the letter of recommendation. Is we always are encouraging our candidates to get out in front of that early, to have your letter writer prepare in advance. But if you're coming up in a time crunch, that could be another reason that you might want to push it to another round. Any of those application pieces, if it's going to not be ready or not be at its best until after the deadline, go ahead and wait, because while some schools will give a slight grace period, I know for us, we generally post deadline have about a week where we'll still allow letters of recommendation to come in before we can't guarantee that they'll be read with the application. It's better to just wait if you feel like that is going to substantially delay your overall application. Suzette, I want to go to the next question. What are some of the most common application mistakes you see, especially in terms of, we're talking right now kind of about rushing to get into a round one. When people are rushing, what does that lead to, and what have you seen?
Yes, so it's funny you should mention the letter of recommendation, because that would probably be my number one mistake that I see, is reaching out to your recommendation writer last minute. You can tell when a letter of recommendation has been rushed because it often arrives late. It reads as quite generic, and oftentimes these days you can tell it's been totally written by AI. And it doesn't touch on your specific reasons for getting an MBA at that target school you're applying to, and how your professional strengths will support you on that journey. So you don't want a letter of recommendation that is just singing your praises. You also want one that feels specific to your MBA goals and to your target program. So that's why we always recommend you reach out to that recommendation writer about 5 or 6 weeks in advance, so that you can have a longer conversation before they begin writing it. You can really take the time to help them understand your goals, maybe grab coffee and catch up, rather than kind of making that process feel quite rushed and transactional. The second mistake I would say is rushing through the essays. So very similar to the letter of recommendation, where you can just tell someone waited until the last minute because the essay is going to feel a little generic and often wholly written by AI, which we are fine with applicants using AI as a polishing tool. Like you might use a tool like Grammarly, but when you have just copy pasted the raw output from ChatGPT, that's when your essays can kind of start to sound like everyone else's. So, we really do take a holistic review process at Fuqua. You will hear that a lot throughout the admission cycle, and it is true. So please take your time on those essays and on that letter of recommendation, because they do matter just as much as your test scores or your work experience do.
Thanks, Suzette. And Elizabeth, anything you want to add from your end on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in addition to that, it's simple mistakes that, if you'd taken time to have friends, family, mentors read through, that probably wouldn't have gotten through, whether that is simple grammar errors or something more significant, like saying I'm applying to X university when the application is for Y university, which I'm sure we've all seen. Things that really just weaken what could be quite a strong application. So maybe you have all the numbers in the right place, but it's things like that that don't help us to see the care that you put in and can just be little deciding factors. And then one other thing that I'll note is that on top of what Suzette was mentioning about the essays, I think that not giving time to just think through things is something that does you a disservice as well. I often find that when I'm thinking about, what I want to write down, what maybe prompts or experiences I want to reference, it's never when you're sitting in front of a blank page with, 15 or 20 minutes that you've allocated for this 300-word prompt. That's never when the good ideas come to you. It's, when you've been thinking about it for a week and you're cycling to work, or you're washing the dishes, or you're watching your friends' kids, it's always those kind of moments when you're like, oh my gosh, why didn't I think of that? So giving yourself time to really think about what you want to do and think about the ideas that you want to work with makes it your application so much stronger and gives you a lot more depth as well. And so it's not necessarily a mistake, but it is a way that your application can absolutely be stronger if you just give yourself a little bit more time.
That's a great point. I always think in events like this, obviously you are all here right now. You're already getting a jump start on preparing your application. But as you are listening to the panelists today and taking notes, hopefully you're starting to collect ideas that by the time you sit down and start to write your application, and particularly the essays, a lot of that will become much more clear about your purpose and your vision and your why. So having that head start now, you're putting yourself in a great position when you do start putting things down on paper. Now, once we get to that point, you've hit submit. What do we do then? Do we email the admissions office every day asking for a response? Amanda, what comes next after that?
Yeah, that's a good one. First of all, celebrate. It takes a lot of work to prepare these applications, writing all the essays, all of that. So please take a moment to celebrate. You took the leap. So really cherish that moment and celebrate it with your friends, family. After that, I think a couple different options depending on what you've done so far. So I think planning visits, attending events with the schools that you're interested in could be great. Matching that with an interview perhaps on campus. If you haven't already been able to do that, I think that's a great option. I always recommend talking with a current student after an interview. Again, if you haven't already, talk to someone from a club you want to join, talk to someone who's pursuing the same industry that you want to. So talking with an actual person, you can read the website, you can talk to us, but talking to someone who's in it in the day-to-day, I think can really round out your research. And if you've done all of that already, you're applying in round one, so you're on top of your game, then find something really fun to distract yourself until that notification date that's on your calendar.
Great. And Lindsay, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think Amanda gave great advice there. Definitely, you've put a lot of hard work into this. So take the time to, take a step back for a second and say, this is a big accomplishment, applying to graduate school, specifically an MBA. I think just a couple other things. And again, going with what Amanda said, just depending on where you are in the process, right? So you submit that application, the next step is, an interview invitation, if a school sends that out. So just, reviewing over what you submitted in your application, right? To make sure that you're telling the interviewer the correct story, you're articulating the why this business school, why MBA makes sense right now in my journey. Really just, doing that, preparation for the interview. And then also I would say keep your recommender in the loop as well, send a thank you note to them, that thanking them for, taking the time to write that recommendation for you, letting them know your application's officially submitted, and then, update them as well on decision dates or maybe when you're going to interview. I think that's a nice touch to do for your recommender. And then the only other thing that could actually, pop up during this time, and it's different how each school would handle this, but if a new positive update comes out, maybe a promotion, a test score improvement, project completion during this time, reach out to the programs that you applied to and share that with them. Now, again, we don't want, every single day, contact, keep following up. But if there is something impactful like that to show, definitely reach out, and each school has a different way of doing that. I know here at Ross, we would ask you to send it to our admissions email, and then they would attach it to your application for you. Now, this doesn't always mean that it's going to be reviewed with that round one. However, if you find yourself in a scenario, maybe where you're placed on a wait list or something like that, that update is already in there and available, so that when we are looking at different candidates post giving a decision, and if we still remain interested in you, that is something we can go and refer back to as well. So I think that's a good point to bring up.
Yeah, that's a great point of what might fall into that category of worth submitting after the fact to be considered. And then our last question before we open it up to the Q&A, so get started thinking about what you might want to drop in the Q&A box. Obviously, if you are applying in an earlier round, that means you're going to have a decision earlier, and then that's going to create a good chunk of time before you actually enter school. So a lot of schools that if you apply in round one, you might find out in December or early January. So that's giving you several months before the actual classes begin in August or September. What should candidates be doing? What are some suggestions of how you can use that time wisely? What does that look like? Suzette, what do you think?
Yeah, so a few recommendations at Fuqua, and I know at other MBA programs as well, we do require you complete MBA math before beginning the program. So you may as well get that out of the way. It is a great way to refresh your quant skills, especially if you have been out of school for a few years. Definitely attend our events and connect with current students and alumni on LinkedIn. They are highly responsive. They love speaking with prospective and admitted students. So definitely encourage you to find some who are in your industry and connect with them so you can go ahead and get a head start on building your network and your recruitment roadmap. We do also host events online and in person throughout the year all around the world for prospective students and admitted students. I will drop a link in the chat to our events page as well. And finally, if you are able to, I do encourage you to take at least a few weeks off before you start the program. Something I hear all the time from current students is that they wish they had taken some time off before they started. It is going to be a busy, fast-paced 2 years ahead of you. So if you can take some time to rest, I think that will help you just get in a better position to kind of hit the ground running.
Yeah, any opportunity you can take to spend with friends, family in particular, using that time, because once you're in it, your world is going to change. So having those moments ahead of time is great. This, of course, being a Forté event, I'd be remiss not to mention that Forté offers a wonderful conference at the beginning of every summer that incoming MBAs are welcome to attend. It's a highlight for me personally of every summer going with our students to attend that, but that is a great way you can take advantage before you're even entering the MBA program. But there's different conferences. It's not just Forté. There are several other organizations or pre-MBA internships that you can take advantage of. But again, if you don't feel like you want to be throwing yourself into, doing quantitative boot camp in that summer, just taking the time to relax, because there will be plenty to do over the course of those 2 years. I will open it now. Does anyone else have anything to add to that final question or anything else that we may have missed along the way before I go to the Q&A?
I'll jump in really, really quickly. I think that it's also just a really good time for self-reflection before the program, thinking about what you want to get out of the year, making a, want to have, need to have list, making a priorities list. I know our program is only 1 year, so it might be a bit more specific for us, but really thinking about, where do I want to be? As Suzette said, connecting with alums to say, what was your journey like? How did you get where you are now? What do you recommend that I do? Am I missing anything? And I think that those are really helpful things that when you do start the program, after hopefully some time off, a little bit of rest and relaxation with family, that you are ready to go and that you have sort of a North Star for yourself. And it doesn't need to be perfect and it doesn't need to be exact. You can have time to change and grow, but really making sure that when you go in, you know where your gaps are and you know how you want to fill them.
Great. Having that sense of why you're there. A lot of that has been developed, of course, through the application process, but really fine-tuning that as you get into the program, because a lot is going to come at you fast, and having that to ground you can be very, very important. All right, so we have a couple of questions already in the Q&A box. We will go through that, and then before we wrap up, we'll have each candidate also share a final piece of advice. But looking at the Q&A, the first question is, what is a typical range of initial deposits? If I can hear from a couple of different schools.
Yeah, I can share at Ross. So initial deposit for us is 3,000 US dollars. And then we require a final deposit usually early June for everyone at the same time. So rounds 1, 2, and 3 would have the same deadline here, and it's another $1,000.
At Fuqua, ours is typically 2,000, pending any changes year to year. And the deposit deadlines do depend on the round. So I would just check our facts and dates page to confirm, but it's usually about a few months after you apply.
So European deposits tend to be a bit higher. Ours is £7,950 for the first reservation fee. And of course, all of this goes towards your final tuition fee payment. But we were talking earlier about benefits of applying in round one. And one that I will also note is that the earlier you apply, there might be a bit more flexibility as well, in case you need a little bit of time, because our deadline is set 3 weeks after you receive your offer. And then we have a second reservation fee payment for you to be fully enrolled. And that's the final condition in order for you to start to apply for accommodation, receive your CAS to apply for visas, and that's £5,300.
We have two $2,000 deposits, so similar to Ross, it sounds like, and all those dates are published on the website.
Great. And I think in most cases, the deposit is credited towards the tuition later. So that is coming back to go towards your tuition. And then most schools, it's a non-refundable deposit. So make sure you are looking very clearly at that. If you do decide ultimately you get into another school, you get off the wait list later on, schools will not refund that deposit. So when you're making that decision, make sure you're making it very clearly, knowing that it won't be refunded. Another question, if you are not accepted in round one, can you try again for another round?
You cannot at Fuqua. You only get one shot per cycle. Now, if you are waitlisted in round one, you may be accepted round two or even round three. If you would like to reapply next cycle, so let's say you don't get in for the fall 2027 intake, but you'd like to reapply for fall 2028, we can clone your application, and I'm sure other schools have that option as well, so that you don't need to start from scratch when you reapply.
Similarly, for us, you can only apply in one round per year. But if you aren't successful and you do apply in the next year, there are a few additional questions that you can answer. Things like, what have you done in the past year? What's changed about your application? And that can just give us a few extra data points to help us understand how far you've come. And also for you to really highlight the ways in which you feel that you've personally improved your application. So that gives you a bit more time to make sure that you are making an application that you feel really proud of and really positive about.
So we're very similar to both schools, very similar to Fuqua. So you can only apply once, and then rounds 2 or round 3, you could be, if you're on the wait list, you could be admitted off the wait list, and that you'll find that out by the round 1 deadline if you would be on the wait list. And then similarly, again, we could clone your application and you would be considered a reapplicant for the following year. And some of your application materials may need to be updated. And the other thing that we ask for is a reapplicant essay. So what has changed in your application over the last year? What stands out? What are the improvements? Maybe you took another test. Maybe you chose a different recommender. So we give you the opportunity to kind of lay it out in front of us as well.
Great. And the one thing I will add from our end is similarly, you can't reapply if it's the full-time MBA and you are denied in one round. You do need to wait until the next application cycle. But we'll often work with you, especially if it's because you don't have maybe enough work experience. If there's a different program within our portfolio that might be better suited, you are absolutely welcome to apply for that program during the same application cycle. The next question that I see here is, have you worked with or know anyone who earned a bachelor's degree in engineering and later went back to get an MBA? If so, how did the MBA impact their career growth? This is personally one of my favorite questions. We often get, I'm a non-traditional applicant, and I think having been in business school admissions for quite some time now, I think the idea of a traditional business school applicant has changed quite dramatically over time. And speaking on behalf of Carrie, it's only about 25% of our incoming class who has a business background, whereas a lot more of our students are coming in with life sciences backgrounds, engineering backgrounds. So I just want to say, rest assured that that is not uncommon at all. And I think that that can greatly add to the diversity of a class, but I'll open that up to the rest of the panelists as well.
I would echo that. Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll go. Yeah, I think engineering actually is one quite common path that we see. People coming with the engineering background and then going to business school to get those kind of traditional business skills like accounting, finance. They didn't take that in undergrad, so getting those skills to be a better manager, and then also the leadership development too. That's a big focus. So kind of preparing themselves to step into those management roles, those leadership roles on a team, kind of out of the more practical side of engineering where they're practicing it, they're in the weeds, developing products and taking on more of a leadership role.
Yeah, absolutely. Similarly, we have so many candidates who do come from a science or a STEM background. And I think that the MBA is really positive for them in a number of different ways. Obviously, it's going to really depend on what you want to do. Do you want to make a massive pivot? You've been in engineering, you're the one, designing the bridges, and now you want to be the one maybe doing something completely different. Do you want to go into consulting or finance? Have a think about what skills you really want to be building through the MBA and about why it's the right fit for you now. But so many of our students have made massive strides, whether it's within their existing sector, building soft skills that they didn't have time to build organically, or whether it's making a really big pivot, making a job change. And a lot of industries really value students who do come from more STEM backgrounds because they have a lot of skills that students who don't, who come from maybe purely business backgrounds don't have. So I think that the sort of interdisciplinary nature of the MBA is fantastic because everybody from every background has something that's really unique and really positive. So as long as you can understand for yourself why the MBA could be a really good step, you have such a good shot of making the change that you want to make. And of having a really positive outcome, even if you don't feel like maybe you're coming from an MBA background, whatever that looks like.
And to quickly piggyback off of that, as more students recruit for consulting every year, I think the ones coming from STEM backgrounds often actually have an advantage because having that specialized knowledge can really help you stand out. If, for example, you want to go into manufacturing consulting or healthcare consulting, that STEM background can help give you a leg up.
Absolutely. The next question we have is in terms of timing, but not in terms of rounds, but do we recommend MBA programs straight out of undergrad, or do you recommend the applicants gain work experience first?
Yeah, so I'll touch on this. I think it depends what kind of MBA program you're going for, right? I'm here representing our full-time MBA program here at Michigan Ross. So for us, two things. We typically see about 5 to 6 years of work experience. That's just the average, right? So there are people who are under that. There are people that are above that. We have quite a large military population in our class. So that's going to push, if they had a career in the military first, that's going to push it, maybe the 8, 9, 10 years, right? And so again, you have to remember that's an average. So people do come in with less than that. But to speak to the question, not particularly straight out of undergrad. We are rolling out a new deferred admissions program, and a lot of schools do offer this as well. It's going to be new this year, and the application for that will open for us in November. So that is, where you would commit, you'd be out of undergrad, you'd commit that 3 years down the line after you get work experience, then you would take on your MBA with that school. So there are options like that out there for those who, just know that that's what they want to do. But like we were sharing before, a lot of people are career pivoters in this. So, you graduate, we'll just go back to the STEM degree. We graduate with the STEM degree, you work a few years, in maybe industry, and then you decide, hey, I want to go do something different. So our program specifically, we're even higher than some of the schools mentioned here today, but we're about 94% career pivoters. So that is quite significant, and probably why our average is more of a 5 to 6 years, because people go out, have their career, and then decide they want to come back and get the MBA to pivot into something else. So that's something you have to think of, and full-time MBA programs are really set up to help you make that transition. But you could consider another, maybe a weekend or a part-time like online MBA program that may be more suitable if you are trying to do this directly out of undergrad.
I'll hop in and say that we actually require 2 years of work experience to apply to our program. Part of that is because so much of what you're learning during the MBA program really relies on you having a sense of, what you have gained so far in your career, as well as what you need to gain. And, coming in straight out of undergrad doesn't allow you as much of that ability to reflect on your career so far. And so similarly, we have a really high proportion of our students who are looking to, make a change, whether that's sector, geography, function. And if you're coming straight out of your undergraduate degree, you won't have that time to think of what have I gained in my career and what can I continue to gain organically before I reach this roadblock at which I do now need an MBA. And an MBA for almost everybody is one thing that you're only going to do once. And so one thing that I always, always, always say is that the MBA will be there for you. And, I'm sure all of our schools will say, we will be here for you in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But if you rush into an MBA before you're really ready for it, then you won't be in as strong of a position to get as much from it. So really think about why you want to be doing an MBA now and what you're going to get out of it before deciding, is now the right time for me?
I would also add that from what I've heard from our Career Center team is that the employers are looking for people with a certain amount of work experience. So as well, if you're coming in with even like less than 2 years, it can make it more challenging after you graduate because these companies just aren't looking for someone with that profile.
Yeah, and the last thing I would add is if you are on the shorter end of work experience coming right from undergrad, we do have programs like the Master's in Management that can be a great stepping stone to an MBA to give you a broader just sense of business in general, a little bit of everything. And then again, that can allow you to step into a full-time MBA program a little bit later on once you have some work experience. So there's various options. If you are anxious to get into a program directly from undergrad, there are some different options you can take instead of going directly into a full-time program. The next question that I see here is about the Forté network for post-MBA career advancement. Hearing about how folks leverage the job boards, attend alumni events, or pivot industries using the community years after graduation. Any tips on where to start would be amazing. So any of our schools, I know we work a lot with Forté, have examples of how students have used those Forté resources post-graduation.
I mean, I'm happy to just say that something that's really helpful, I think, about the MBA as well as the networks that are built around it are that they function so much on building a network and building a community. And of course, it's fantastic to have the community at your school. And that's something that Forté can strengthen as well. We have our Forté fellows who all have, monthly lunches together, they meet up, they do events together. They work on how we can, work with them to make the MBA more accessible and more useful for people who are coming from who want to expand it for women. And I think that that's something that's really fantastic. But also the community that you're building doesn't end at your school. And I think that being able to attend Forte events to meet people who are in your industry and connect with them, or the industry that you want to be in, and connect with them and build meaningful connections outside of perhaps your own business school is something that really transcends and strengthens the network and the community that you already have. You have, for us, 250 students, but, expand that to Ross and to Fuqua and to McDonough, and then you have a really, really strong, really robust network of people that you can turn to who have a lot of other experiences that maybe you haven't had. And similarly, you have a lot of experiences that they haven't had access to. And I think that that's something that really gives you a little bit more leverage in a wider network that is always something that you're going to want to turn to.
Jessica shared in the chat for everyone joining the call some additional resources on the website where you can go and you can see the different activities that alumni can be engaged with. A question kind of going back to the professional experience. By the time I apply, I'll have about 3 years of full-time work experience. Would you consider that to be too little?
So at Fuqua, we do not have a required minimum number of years of work experience you need in order to apply. 3 years would be on the ever so slightly low range of average. So our typical range is 2 to 9 with a real concentration between like 4 to 6. So you would be well within range for our program, and I think pretty much all the programs on this call. The most important thing, though, is not the number of years of work experience, but the impact you have made in those years. We definitely focus on quality over quantity. So really be sure to highlight in your work experience section that impact, specifically how you have taken a leadership role already pre-MBA in managing people, managing projects, and managing budgets. Those are kind of the big three.
Just to add, in terms of how we typically calculate years of work experience, we generally look at the number of years post-graduation, so post-undergrad, up until the time that you're going to matriculate. So don't think of it at the time that you apply. So if you're submitting your application this September, think about if I'm going to continue to work maybe until next June or July, if I'm starting in August or September of a program. You still want to calculate that into your total number of years of work experience. It doesn't stop at the time that you submit the application itself. A question kind of on the opposite end of that, thinking about candidates who have more than the average years of work experience, 10 plus. I often see that MBAs would be recommended, but what if you are not executive level and feel that you would be out of your place in an MBA cohort? What would you recommend for that?
I can jump in on this one. So I can relate. So when I started the MBA program, I had over 10 years of work experience. So I was in a similar position. I think a couple things based off of what you asked. So first of all, for the executive MBA programs, I think sometimes the word executive can be a little misleading in that it's again, like it's more for someone who's at that higher management level, not necessarily an executive. There's certainly people who are more at a director level. Titles look different at all kinds of organizations. So I would encourage you to chat with an admissions advisor to see what program might be best for you. For me, as a admissions committee member, when I'm reviewing an application of someone who is on that higher end, I want to understand why you chose the program that you did. So I want to make sure you explored all the options available to you and you found the one that's the right fit. So thinking about, career support, thinking about the structure of the program. So for us, our executive program is one weekend online, one in person. And some people don't want that format. They want to preserve their weekends to be like with their family, for example. So for me, it's understanding why you chose the program that you did. And again, like helping you get to the right place to meet your goals. And for you, I'd consider, you say you might feel out of place in an executive cohort, but also considering, would you feel out of place with a MBA cohort if you are with someone with 3 years of work experience? I'll say for me, some of my best friends were some of the youngest people in the cohort. That didn't really matter much to me. It's more like where you are in life, where you are in your career. So I was great with that, had a great time with them. So it made me feel young. Every now and then they drop a year that they did something in undergrad, what would give me a minor heart attack, but it was a great time. So all things to consider, but ultimately I'd say talk with an admissions advisor to make sure you get to the right place.
We might have just time for one more question. Would you say undergraduate GPA is a large determining factor in admissions for those with 6+ years of steady work experience? Is this where you would suggest GRE, GMAT scores would increase odds of admission, or would you have other suggestions to balance this?
Yeah, I can answer this one. So again, we've kind of discussed this. Really, your application is looked at holistically, right? So we're looking at every single piece. So I wouldn't put all the emphasis on one, right? We got to make sure it's balanced out. So, if you're speaking on maybe you have a lower GPA, I'm guessing that's maybe what this question is, and trying to understand if the work experience is going to balance this out, or if you should take one of the tests. So, a test is, kind of an equalizer. And we're really looking for the quantitative behind this. So again, that really depends on what your degree is in, right? And what your work experience is in. We have people, like we've discussed on this call, coming from those STEM backgrounds, right? Those are usually pretty heavy quant. And we also understand that those are very rigorous degrees, right? So we may see some of those applications come in with slightly lower GPAs, and we kind of understand that. But really, there's no one solution for everyone. So if you think that taking a test would improve your chances. And again, people from those backgrounds tend to have that quant experience and tend to maybe possibly do well on the exams as well. So if that's just another data point that we can use to make a decision, right? So really, at Ross, we say test score is a personal choice of what you'd want to do. So, and you can take it and, perhaps not do well on it as well. So then we have another avenue. You do the statement of quantitative academic readiness, you prove your quantitative abilities to us, and then we make a decision off of that. So it's really self-reflection and self-assessment to decide whether that's the path that you should go or not. But a lot of schools have now offered options that you can make the best decision for yourself.
I think to add to that really quickly, a test score, if you do well, is never something that's going to, work against you. We ask for one regardless. But really, at the end of the day, what we're looking for is people who are going to succeed in our programs. The application itself is essentially you telling us that you are going to be able to succeed, and you showing us through different mediums, whether it's telling us about your work experience. I'm going to succeed in getting where I want to go because I've done it before. Showing us, your academic background. I'm going to succeed in your program. I'm going to succeed in learning things I haven't had the opportunity to learn before because I've done it before. And that can look a number of different ways. It can look like a really strong academic background, but that, if you don't have that, that's fine. Give us a few more data points to work with, whether it's the GPA or the GMAT or the GRE, or for some schools, the EA or the statement of quantitative readiness. Or it could look like short courses that you're taking to bump up skills that that you're lacking in a little bit. Really give us as many as many ways to understand, yes, this person is going to be ready to take on what is actually a very academic degree, and help us to understand, here's why this person is ready to be here and why they'd be a really good part of the community. And also, just one last thing is that we have an additional information section where if there's something that went wrong or something you want to give us information about for your GPA, you can do that and you can give us a little context.
Well, I want to thank all of our panelists for all of the insights shared today. This was phenomenal information. I think overall, what we all want to see as you're submitting your application is to be intentional throughout your application. Make sure all of the pieces are cohesive and reinforce who you are, what you're hoping to accomplish, and why the MBA is the next step. I think a lot of applicants spend so much time trying to impress us that they forget to help us understand them. So the authenticity and the clarity piece is always going to be much more compelling than the trying to be the perfect candidate. Panelists, if you want to drop in the chat any links to events or any contact information, and then I will turn things over to Jessica from Forté to close us out.
Thank you so much, Jen, and thank you all so much for being here with us today. We have had an amazing panel, amazing questions, amazing answers. So thank you all so much. We encourage you to check out our other MBA prep resources. They're available on demand by visiting our YouTube page. And also, I'll drop a few more links in the chat for ways for you to stay engaged with Forté. Please check out our MBA launch program for application prep support, as well as checking out if we'll be in a city near you soon this August. So thank you all again, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much, y'all. Bye.